If you've made a project in Godot before, you're probably already wondering, how are you even going to start a project like this? If you're trying to make a character move, what you'd do is you would make a character, you would add whatever nodes they need, and you would write a script that turns input events into moving the player character. The thing that made me suspicious that this was possible at all was that I had an idea for how to move a player character without any script. What we need is some way to listen to input events the player makes and turn those into signals. When you have a signal in Godot, you can send that to pretty much anything you want in the game and call whatever functions it has. It is kind of the de facto way to tell something else, hey, something just happened and I want you to do something now. You might use it to make it so that when a timer finishes, a node deletes, or some particles start when an animation is done, or some music plays when you push a button. And buttons are the thing that really make this possible. Buttons are what you might use in any menu in a video game. It's something you click on it and a pressed signal comes out. In real-time strategy games, you often want buttons to be triggered by pushing specific keys, for example, hitting the A key to select all of your units. Because of that, there is a little object in Godot called a shortcut. What a shortcut does is it lets you attach an input event, and whenever that input event happens, the button gets pushed. Now we can have a move up button that is triggered by the W key, and whenever you push the W key, your pressed signal pops out. Okay, we've got an input event and we've got a signal. Now we need to go ahead and use that signal so that the player will move. This is a hurdle. And the reason it's a hurdle is because we're currently only detecting signals the moment you push the button to move. There's no real way to detect if you're holding a key down and continuously move in that direction. So my best solution I've come up with for moving the player is to make it so that when you push a button, I can tell the player, make them a rigid body, a bit like a bouncy ball you can knock around with physics, and give them some velocity in a specific direction. For example, making it so that when you hit the W key, you get shunted upwards. That does the trick. It does mean holding down the button doesn't do anything, but we take what we can get. So, 4 buttons are hidden off to the side of our screen. Whenever we push an associated W, A, S, or D key, we shunt a player around in a direction. We've now got some basic movement without any code going on. I do have some theories about how to make moving work. They're cursed. One of them is to make it so that whenever you hit an arrow key, it changes the gravity that's applied to the grip player, so you will accelerate in a given direction. That will have consequences. I'm going to leave it. We've got sort of snake-like jumpy movement at the moment, and I'll take that over nothing for the sake of being able to make this project with no code. I should probably take this opportunity to actually tell you why I'm doing this. So I do a bunch of battle videos with GamedevTV. It's usually me versus 2 other developers in different engines, and we try to make a game to a specific theme. And that was to make a bullet hell game with only 1 script. Now that's hard, but it's far from impossible. You just usually need to take 1 script and make that control all the different parts of your game, which has architectural problems associated with it, or your script might get very, very long. But right here during testing, I came up with my idea, what if we had no code at all? Now, I don't mean like using visual scripting as an alternative to coding. No, I mean just using the tools that Godot's nodes give you in order to create a whole project. And this is going to have the lovely upside of you're going to end up with some twisted Lovecraftian Rube Goldberg machine upon which your game precariously dangles. Anyway, now we've got movement, an awful lot of weird things have become possible. For example, we can add a goal. We can add a flag into our level, and we can add an area to it. An area detects when a body enters and emits one of those very useful signals. So we can make it so that when we get to this end goal, a signal comes out of the area, and we start an animation playing that says you won the game. That's what I'd like to say, but because we are built on a tower of matchsticks, nothing just works like that. So signals, they have data that goes with them. These are arguments. For example, when you enter an area, the signal that comes out tells us what area just entered. This is so in a script, you can use that information or ignore it. we can't ignore it because we're sort of plugging tubes together when we're making our game. So if we're sending data that the receiving part doesn't want, everything will crash. So if we try to start an animation and it passes along information like the body that just started entering this area and thus triggered the animation, it'll crash because it doesn't know what to do with the data. So we need to start fiddling with this connection. And Godot has a very advanced connection window to make you be able to create all of these useful connections in your game. And we can unbind the body argument. So we can discard that bit of information and then it won't crash when we connect that signal to the function we want to call. We then want to add on an argument that is the name of the animation we want to play, the win the game animation. We want to tell that as well. We now hit another big caveat, which is the configuration window, although it can bind arguments and unbind arguments separately, won't let us do it at the same time. Which means we're now in a wretched situation where we need to launder our signal so that we can remove the data and get a new signal out, and then as a separate step, add new data on top of it. So we need some kind of node that can emit a signal with no extra arguments attached to it. And there's only one I can think of that you can easily make just emit a new signal. And that is you can start a timer. So you can make a timer, you can trigger it to start and run for the minimum amount of time possible, which is 0.05 seconds. And when it's done, it emits a signal that says it has timed out. This is good. This doesn't have any extra data on it, so we can use that timeout signal to then start an animation playing. So whenever we want to have entering an area trigger something, we have to send a body just entered signal off to a timer, discard any extra data, start the timer, wait for it to finish. When that finishes, signal comes out. This signal we can attach some extra data to. For example, we want to play the win the game animation, and then we can make the animation player play with this signal. With that, we can now have a player that moves, we can get to an objective, and when you get to the objective it says the player's won the game. We can even do stuff like disable the process mode for the player so that that velocity we're applying to it doesn't do anything, so that they actually freeze. If I was a more sensible man, I could stop here. I'm not going to. You're going to get so many little avenues and asides from me throughout this video. I'm sorry, it's nothing but weird niche complications the whole way down. So we want to be able to quit the game at some point like this. Usually you'd put a button in, you'd click it, and it would exit the application. Unfortunately, in order to quit the game in Godot, in a script, you need to get the tree, which is an object that has functionality like quitting the game. To the best of my knowledge, you can't do this without a script. I've tried a few things. In an animation player, you can use the ... symbol to access a parent. I've tried to access all the way up to the top of the tree and call its functions. It crashes and breaks in unpredictable ways. This led to the idea, what if we force Godot to crash when you want to quit the game? Which I've been unable to reliably reproduce. I've certainly made it crash a lot of times, but not in a way that I can make it so that you can hit a button and it crashes the project. I did consider, oh, why don't I build a version of Godot with a C++ function in on a node that doesn't matter too much that can just quit the game. I think that goes against the spirit of this project. At that point, going back to the original game dev battle, maybe I could have just added a button that builds a whole game without a script at all, and because my game engine's open source, I can do that. I elected not to. As a result, you can't quit the game. You have to click the cross button in the top right of the window, like in Neanderthal. We're living with that. The biggest caveat to having no script in your project is there's no easy way to instantiate. I say the biggest, there are so many caveats, but this one was particularly irritating, and that's there's no way to instantiate game objects. In a game, you might instantiate bullets and fire them off willy-nilly and then use a script that cleans them up. We don't have a script, so we can't instantiate things dynamically. So we have to make every bullet in our game right at the start and have them ready to fire. I'm going to start off by just trying to make a bullet. So I made a rigid body. I added an area to the player and made it so that when that area touches the bullet, we launder the signal by sending it to a timer. When that timer's done, it triggers a different animation to the win the game animation that says you've died. we've got death happening now. We need to make these bullets fire. So one option is to give the bullets a velocity in a given direction. This has the caveat that they use global coordinates. So if you want all your bullets to go in different directions, you have to set up the direction the bullet fires on a bullet by bullet basis and add ways to clean themselves up. We could do something like that, but we could also just make the game simpler in order to work around these problems. So if we look at a game like Undertale, you'll see it's bullet heavy, but it's all about these bullets following specific attack patterns, and then us being able to avoid them with our player character. If we go into it thinking, okay, we're going to build all of our bullets on a track, we can just come up with all these predefined attack patterns and make it so that they'll play out with animation players, because we know we can use animation players to make things happen. So we need to make a bullet that can fire across the screen. That's a starting point. So we can make a path 3D. This is a thing that has a Bezier curve in it, and you can attach a path follow 3D node onto that, and then it has a property that allows you to control how far along the path it should be. So then we can attach our bullet as a child of that path follow and use an animation player to make it start at one end and move to the other, or create another animation that makes it start at the opposite end and go back to the beginning. And now we have two animations that we can trigger that will make a bullet go right and left. Unfortunately, looping this isn't going to create enough variety, so we're going to need to abstract our thinking about this project an extra step and try and make it so that we can trigger these animations in interesting ways. Thankfully, animation players can control other animation players. So we're about to build a sort of leaning tower of animation players built on top of each other. It's going to be nasty, stinky and bad. What we're going to need to do is, now we've got our path 3D with an animation player that moves it across, we can copy and paste, like, let's say 5 of them. So we've got 5 animation players. We'll make another animation player that can trigger sets of these to move in sequence. For example, doing a wipe from top to bottom where they all start a few seconds after each other, making all the ones at the top move, making all the ones at the bottom move, making them go in the opposite direction. Anything like that. We can just come up with all of our different patterns in here. And now we have this thing that can trigger these attack patterns, but that's not enough for a game, that's just one attack. So we need to go up an extra abstracted level, and we need to look down on that animation player that controls the other animation player, and we need our third uber animation player that is really the whole game. What this animation player is going to do is it's going to tell that animation player a layer down to do either a wipe from left to right, or a wipe from right to left, or do just the top ones, or do just the bottom ones, and then play them all in sequence. When you have that, you've got everything you need. You can extrapolate it out, you can add more layers of bullets going in different directions and start interlacing how they'll fire in their different rows. You can start adding different shapes. You could do like a boss wave swooping circle that comes in and goes through and have that happen at specific times. And really, you just need to use this animation player in truly hellish ways until you have about 2 minutes of gameplay where you avoid incoming bullets. And you've got a bullet hell shooter with no code. I think that's really, really rad. We're just... This project did something to my head. We can go deeper. We can add more complexity. A huge problem that I found is the game's hard because the controls are bad and because the detection's wonky. So it'd be really nice if you had health. There's no way built in to store and read variables in any meaningful way. We can only predefine values that get passed around in signals and in our animations. So in order to save state, like how much damage you've taken, how are you going to do that? If you attach it to the bullet, every time you hit a bullet, we can go say, okay, set you to 80% of your health. The next time you hit a bullet, it'll set you to 80% of your health again. We can't tell it to subtract a value from it because it can't read whatever the current thing is because there's no script. So, if you want to add complexity, we have access to one other thing in Godot that can let us build complexity. And that's that Godot is always running a physics simulation. And one could represent the health as an object in a tower that falls down to lower platforms and use that physical space to set the literal health pool of the player. Anyway, look at my Jenga tower here. You'll see there's a slab at the top. Whenever the player gets hit, all of the ledges collapse, and the health bar falls down to a lower level. And then at the level below, that specific area sets your health bar to be 66% full. And then when it falls to the platform below, 33% health, and at the platform below, 0%, and defeat, and we'll play the death animation. This is bad. Many more caveats to come. The timers that introduce latency, there's even more latency now. Whenever you take damage, a block has to fall off a shelf and land on a platform for you to physically take the damage. That's janky. It's not ideal. If you want to add more platforms, it takes ages because you have to reconnect all of the signals for all the other platforms. If you want to use animatable bodies to move in and out to make the platforms actually move, it's very, very hard to be reliable. There's no script that can fix things if it goes wrong. Many of my early iterations flung the tablet that represents your health out of the Jenga tower. When your health block is out of the Jenga tower, it will fall forever because I didn't put a platform below it, making the player functionally immortal, which is cool. It's kind of like if you imagine you're playing Monopoly, it's like your player character's fallen off of the track and onto your carpet, onto some patches on the carpet. Whenever you roll the dice, you move it along the carpet. Because the carpet doesn't have properties or hotels or buildings on it, you never have to pay money, so you'll never die because you've fallen off the track. It's a bit like that. Anyway, with our physics simulated health pool set up, we can now take multiple hits before we die. With that, we have a game. You can take damage and you can complete it. This is playable on itch right now, so feel free to go ahead and try that. One of the big things I've been thinking about more or less non-stop is how to add randomization into this process. A key problem we have here is every time you play the game, the animation that determines what waves you fight will always be the same. This is because we've got no script to randomize stuff, so we need to find a node built into Godot that can randomize stuff. There's one. So let's say we added an audio stream player into this. It doesn't need to actually play audio. The important thing is that Godot can randomize the order audio files are played in. This means I could create an empty audio file that lasts, say, a fraction of a second, or 1 second, or 2 seconds, make it shuffle those, make it play one, and then we'd get a signal out a random amount of time after the game started that we could then use and plug into a device, let's call it the randometron. You can see this hypothetical device here. This is just an example animation. It cycles through colors, but we can use that finished signal coming out of the audio stream player to make it so that this animation player stops. And you can see that we're getting different colors coming out every time because the animation player is stopping at a different point. The fact that we can stop animation players at different points mean that we can make our animation player set up a physics simulation that we can then leverage to make another animation player start playing, and thus start selecting levels pretty much at random. I was really hoping it would be easier than that. The audio stream player, in my head, I was like, oh, it'll emit the name of the song we're playing, and then I'd be able to connect that to my animation player and just use the name of the song as the name of the animation. It didn't do it. It emits no data, but it is the only way I've come up with to emit a signal at a random time. So that was all ludicrous. I would need to reiterate, these skills don't translate to a lot of practical applications. Don't try to make games like this, but there are useful things to learn. Shortcuts in buttons are a nice thing to use. If you ever want to show off and make something move without a script, you can use that shortcut button trick. Also, the knowledge that you can connect pretty much any signal to pretty much any function and alter the arguments that go in and out is very practical game development knowledge in Godot for like quickly prototyping stuff. It's kind of, this whole project is sort of a testament to just how toolboxy and practical Godot is, because there are all of these useful tools that you can technically use to make a game without script. It's not easy, it was hard, it took a lot of thought, but it's useful knowledge, and I hope someone gets some use out of that. I also have courses with GamedevTV and my own courses on itch that you can buy if you want to learn how to script. Not script. This is an odd one out video. Yeah, I also have a Discord. Feel free to join that if you want to contact me more directly. Anyway, thanks a bunch for watching. I need to collapse. See you in the next one.